Hello everyone, welcome to Bible Bites. Dean Dwyer from Isa Street Baptist Church with you. Our question for today is directed more so to our women, but it's good for the men to understand the response to this so you can advocate for your daughters and your wives and other women in your congregation. It's one of these questions which has really divided people for a long time. So we need to give a biblical answer so that we can try and put this issue to bed for the women that we know. And the question is, should Christian women wear pants or skirts? You know, many years ago when my wife was a young lady in our church, she was harassed, unfortunately, by some legalistic believers who demanded that girls should only wear skirts to worship services. I'm sure you've encountered these types of people around Christian circles. And as I said, sadly, it is one of those issues which really divides believers. And in the grand scheme of things, of all of the issues that divide believers, really, this shouldn't be it. You know, can I say that the faithfulness of a daughter of God is not ultimately measured by what she wears, but by her walk in the Spirit. You know, there's an old passage in the Old Testament that some use to address the matter of women wearing pants or skirts. And in Deuteronomy 22:5, it says this: "A woman must not wear men's clothing, nor a man wear women's clothing, for the Lord your God detests anyone who does this." So let's get the context right, because whenever you're studying scripture, you must get the historical context in order to get the true meaning behind the scripture. So this was a command for Israel. Obviously, we're in the Old Testament. We're in the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy. So this was a command for Israel to maintain gender distinctions in their clothing. And also what it was, as we just read, a prohibition against cross-dressing. Now, since no Israelite at the time wore pants or slacks or skirts, because both genders wore pretty much the same thing. It was some type of robe. But we must ask ourselves how this would apply to different cultures. And what we could say is that the general principle is that men and women ought to dress in a way appropriate for their culture, maintaining gender distinctions. For example, if we take our Deuteronomy 22:5 passage, it doesn't forbid Scotsmen from wearing kilts, and it does not forbid a woman from wearing pants, as long as she is not trying to appear to be a man. You see, at the end of the day, it's all about intention. What is the intention of the heart? You know, in all things, a discussion of grace is appropriate here as well. Christians are not under the law. We know that, and we rejoice at that fact. Rather, we know we are justified by faith in Jesus Christ. In fact, the believer, as we know from Scripture, is dead to the constraints of the law. A believer does not or should not live by legalism, nor by license, but by grace alone. You know, the Bible contains no command governing the specific articles of clothing a woman should wear. No passage mentions dresses, skirts, pants, or slacks as either required or forbidden. The issue in Scripture always is modesty, as well as gender distinction. And they're the two principles you've got to keep in mind when you're talking about this issue. Is it appropriate? Is it modest? And does it reinforce gender distinction? Paul addressed Christian women concerning their attire. This was in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 9 and 10. He says as follows: "I also want women to dress modestly, with decency and propriety, not with braided hair, or gold, or pearls, or expensive clothes, but with good deeds appropriate for women who profess to worship God." Women who worship God should be appropriately dressed, and their clothing choices should reflect humility, not ostentation, neatness, not sloppiness, and moderation, not unrestraint. Now, we're focusing on women, but that also applies to men. Men don't have free license to do what they wish as well. This is really a focus for everybody when we're talking about these issues. But the issue of Christian women wearing pants always needs to be approached with grace. And unfortunately, and particularly in my wife's case many years ago, it was not approached with grace, and it was done very forcefully and rather harshly. Scripturally, a woman should wear modest clothing appropriate for her gender and for the situation. Are there pants made specifically for women that are modest and appropriate for some situations? Of course there is. Yes, the answer is yes. And Christian women are free to wear them. It's a matter for a woman's own conscience before the Lord, and in many cases it is not appropriate for another believer, particularly legalistic believers, to comment on. So, my final advice is this: love the person who God places in front of you. See them how He sees them, and please treat them with respect. Focus on the inward person, not the outward appearance.